Hello, my name is Kalia, and my parents canceled my 18th birthday without telling me because my older sister was in a bad mood. They called everyone behind my back, told them not to come, and then let me decorate the backyard by myself, thinking I was hosting a party they had already erased. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was realizing it wasn't the first time they'd written me out of something that should have been mine. My name, my memories, my place in the family, and when I finally spoke up, they tried to destroy what little voice I had left. But someone was watching, someone they didn't expect. What happens when the family golden child isn't golden anymore, and the quiet one stops playing along? I woke up early that morning, too early, if I'm being honest. The house was still quiet, the way it always was just before sunrise in Scottsdale. I stretched beneath my quilt, listening for signs of life. Nothing yet. But that made sense. It was my 18th birthday after all. Maybe they were planning something. Maybe, just maybe, today would be different. Downstairs, I moved on autopilot, trying not to get ahead of myself. I baked the chocolate chip cookies Grandma Winona taught me to make when I was little, the ones we used to eat warm off the tray while sitting barefoot on her porch swing. I arranged them neatly on the platter. Then I hung the string lights I had begged Mom to buy last weekend. The patio already looked like something off Pinterest. I added balloons in soft lavender and white, picked to match the dress I planned to wear tonight, the one I saved for weeks to afford, the one still hanging on my closet door upstairs. My mom joined me around 10, still in her robe, sipping from her Boss Babe mug. She smiled at me, a quick one, not quite reaching her eyes. "Everything's looking good, honey," she said, then disappeared upstairs. Not a word about the guest list. Not a word about the plans. And still, I kept busy, cutting lemons for water pitchers, folding napkins, texting friends, just the usual pre-party things. And in the back of my mind, I kept repeating, they haven't forgotten. They know this matters. By 1 in the afternoon, the Arizona heat was climbing, but I didn't mind. I stayed in the shade, checking my phone every few minutes for updates from friends or my cousin Eva, who had promised to help me set up. Nothing. At 3, I went inside and found my mom on the phone, talking in hushed tones. She quickly ended the call when she saw me and smiled again. "Still working on a few things," she said. "Why don't you freshen up? Maybe take a break?" So I did. I went upstairs, laid out my dress, then sat on the edge of my bed, scrolling through my phone. Still no texts, no missed calls, just a quiet timeline and the creeping sense that something was off. By 5, the patio was picture perfect, cookies arranged, table set, music playlist ready to go. I even lit the citronella candles around the yard. My phone buzzed. I lunged for it. Just a news alert. At 6:30, I slipped into my dress, light lavender, off the shoulder, with a delicate silver zipper. I had done my own hair, pinned half up, the way I liked it, simple but elegant. I took a deep breath and looked in the mirror. Then I went outside. Still no one. By 7, I was pacing. By 7:30, I was cold even in the desert air. By 8, I stopped checking my phone. By 8:30, I was back in the kitchen, staring at the untouched cookies. At exactly 9 o'clock, I walked into the living room. My parents were there, on the couch, watching Netflix. "You're kidding me," I said. They looked up, startled, as if I had just interrupted a regular Tuesday night. "Where is everyone?" My voice cracked despite my best efforts. "Where is Eva? The Thompsons? Anyone?" Dad paused the show, leaned back, and glanced up the stairs. "Lower your voice," he said, his tone clipped. "You'll wake Sable. She's finally sleeping." That's when I froze. "Sable?" I repeated. "She was supposed to be in LA. "She couldn't fly," Mom added, fidgeting with the remote. "Storms, all flights grounded." I stared at both of them. "So?" "She's been devastated, honey," Mom said. "That trip was important to her." "And my birthday?" I asked. They didn't answer right away. "We canceled it," Dad said eventually. "It didn't feel right to celebrate with Sable so upset." My head buzzed. "So, you canceled my 18th birthday, without telling me, because my sister was having a bad day?" "We thought it would be best," Mom said. "We didn't want to hurt her feelings." I felt everything in me go still. You let me decorate, bake, set the table. You let me believe. She was inconsolable, Dad interrupted. We were trying to avoid another episode. I looked at them both, sitting on the couch, completely calm. As if what they had done wasn't cruel, as if I was being unreasonable for even questioning it. And you didn't tell me, I said slowly, voice tightening. You didn't even have the decency to say, hey, your party's off because your sister's pouting in her room. Mom shifted uncomfortably. We didn't want to upset you. You seemed excited. That was the moment something broke inside me. Not loud, not explosive, just gone. I looked down at the platter in my hands, the cookies I had baked that morning, now slightly cooled, the chocolate chips no longer glistening. I had made them with hope, with care, for people who didn't even bother to show up because my family told them not to. Even now, I whispered, it's her comfort you guard, not my heartbreak. I stood there, dress pressed and perfect, hands trembling as I set the tray down on the coffee table between us. My parents didn't move. The TV glowed in the background, paused mid-scene. I turned and walked out of the room, my heels clicking softly against the tile. I didn't cry, not then, but something else settled in, something colder, a knowing. And that was the moment I knew. I had never been the daughter worth celebrating. I didn't remember walking up the stairs. I didn't remember setting the tray down or the way my fingers trembled against the edge of the table. What I do remember was the silence, how it followed me like a second skin as I climbed toward my room. The soft creak of the banister, the hum of the ceiling fan in the hallway, the faint scent of lavender from the candle I had lit that morning. All of it felt louder than it should have. I hadn't taken off my shoes yet, even though my heels were killing me. The dress itched around the shoulders, suddenly too tight, like it didn't belong to me anymore. Maybe it never had. I rounded the corner and stepped into the hallway outside my bedroom, and that's when I saw her, Sable, twirling in front of the mirror like she was auditioning for some off-brand fashion vlog, phone in one hand, the other tossing her highlighted hair over her shoulder. She was wearing my dress, the lavender one I'd picked out months ago, the one I'd spent 3 weekends babysitting for, the one I had hung on my closet door this morning, still zipped in its clear garment bag. It was hugging her body like it had always belonged to her. My mouth went dry. I leaned against the doorframe, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. That was supposed to be mine. She turned, glanced at me through the mirror. Her lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. You weren't using it, she said casually. Don't be dramatic. I blinked. She went back to adjusting the neckline. Honestly, you're so lucky I fit into it. I didn't even think it would zip, but... She turned again, showing off her back. Boom. Perfect fit. There was no apology in her tone, no hint of remorse, just that same sugary sharpness she used every time she wanted something that wasn't hers. You knew this was for my party, I said, standing straighter. Sable sighed. Yeah, well, that party's not happening. Mom said you were being weird about everything and didn't want guests. She paused, then added, Frankly, if you were going to mope around and make it awkward for everyone, it's better this way. I didn't answer. Couldn't. She pulled her phone up again. Anyway, my friends are on their way over. Nothing big. Just a chill vibe to help me decompress. I stared at her. You're having a party? I asked. It's not a party, she said quickly. It's a support circle, healing night, self-care. You wouldn't get it. She walked past me without waiting for a response. Her perfume hit me in waves, jasmine, vanilla, the expensive kind she always made Mom buy on their girls' trips to the outlet malls. I followed her into the upstairs den, which had already been redecorated with string lights, the same ones I'd used earlier in the yard. My cookies were now arranged neatly on a tray next to 2 bottles of rosé and a stack of solo cups. There were candles, music playing low from the speaker I'd bought last Christmas. My stomach twisted. I backed away before she could say anything else and returned to my room. There, I sat on the edge of my bed, the hem of my dress now wrinkled beneath me. I pulled out my phone, needing something, anything to distract myself from the knot forming in my chest. That's when I saw it. Sable had already posted. "Grateful for my real ones," the caption read. "Healing night with the only people that matter. #selfcare. #vibes only." She had posted a photo of herself standing under the lights I'd hung, holding a cookie I had made, in a dress I had earned, surrounded by balloons I had inflated. Behind her, two girls I barely recognized were sipping wine and smiling at something outside the frame. My heart didn't drop. It shattered. Quietly, I looked at the timestamp. 5 minutes ago, she had hijacked my birthday, my space, my moment, and turned it into a prop for her self-pity. I locked my phone and tossed it on the bed. My breathing was shallow. I didn't cry. I didn't even curse. I just sat there, blinking at the wall, thinking about all the other times I had been pushed aside like this. Christmas mornings where my gifts were practical, while hers were designer. Family dinners where I served the food and she delivered speeches. School plays where I waited for someone to ask if I was performing, only to be told how proud they were of Sable for letting me be involved. I wasn't invisible. I was background. I got up, walked to the dresser, and opened the drawer where we kept old photo albums. I flipped through them. Birthday parties, graduations, summer vacations. She was always in the center of the frame. I was in the corner, sometimes half-cropped, sometimes blurred. In one group shot, I wasn't in it at all. I had taken the picture. And yet, I had told myself for years that maybe I just hadn't smiled enough. Maybe I didn't speak loudly enough. Maybe I had made myself easy to forget. But that night, something shifted. It wasn't shame I felt. It wasn't even jealousy. It was clarity. I finally understood what they were willing to erase, and why. Because I had never demanded space. I had accepted scraps and convinced myself they were full meals. I had smiled when I felt like screaming, bit my tongue when I should have bitten back. Downstairs, the doorbell rang. Laughter floated up from the den. I didn't move. I didn't open the door. I didn't say a word. Instead, I opened my closet, pulled out my backpack, and started to pack a few things. Not a full suitcase, not yet, but enough. And that was the moment I started remembering everything they wanted me to forget. I didn't sleep much that night. Not out of rage or sadness, but something more hollow. A dull ache that throbbed behind my ribs, too quiet to scream, too deep to ignore. The house was dead silent when I slipped out of bed, the kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful, but like a warning. I didn't bother changing out of the oversized t-shirt I'd thrown on after tearing off my birthday dress. It was still on the floor, wrinkled and lifeless, like a costume I never got to perform in. I opened my door slowly and stepped into the hallway. The walls were lined with family portraits, Mom's pride and joy. Every holiday, every milestone, every curated moment of Monroe family unity had been captured and framed here like a museum exhibit. I started at the far end, near the photo from our trip to Disney World. I had been 11. Sable had her arms flung around both parents, beaming with mouse ears on her head. I was in the back, holding our backpack, squinting against the sun. You could barely see me behind Dad's shoulder. Next was Christmas 2 years ago. Sable in a red sequin dress, front and center. I was to the left, cropped at the edge, mid-blink, like an afterthought they'd kept in out of obligation. Graduation. Hers, not mine. She stood alone in her cap and gown, Mom and Dad on either side, hands on her shoulders. I had taken the photo. I moved down the hallway slowly, studying every frame, vacation photos where I was holding the camera, birthday parties where I wasn't visible, school events where my name was left out of the caption on Facebook. They always said I was low maintenance, I whispered to no one. Turns out, I was low visibility. Back in my room, I sat on the edge of my bed and picked up my phone. Notifications were still coming in from Sable's post, her healing night with my cookies, my dress, my decorations. I hadn't looked at any of the comments earlier. Now I did. Queen energy as always. You deserve it, babe. Don't let toxic people ruin your shine. So glad you finally cut out the negative energy in your life. Negative energy? Was that me? I checked my messages. A few unopened texts from Eva, one from my friend Rachel, another from Ryan. I opened Rachel's first. Hey girl, I hope you're okay. Your mom told us not to come because you were dealing with something emotional. We didn't want to make it worse. Then Ryan. Sorry we bailed. We thought you were in a rough place and needed space. Didn't want to overstep. Then Eva. Kalia, I'm so sorry. I was ready to drive down, but your mom called and said you canceled the party yourself. Are you okay? My fingers trembled as I read and reread those messages. I hadn't canceled anything. I hadn't told anyone to stay away. My parents had done it for me. They didn't just cancel my birthday, they rewrote the script entirely. They made me the unstable one, the recluse, the girl who couldn't handle a party, the girl who should be pitied, not celebrated. They planned my absence like it was damage control, I said under my breath. I turned off my phone, set it face down on my nightstand, and stared at the ceiling. My mind kept replaying every moment over the past few months. Sable crying because her brand collaboration fell through. Mom whispering that I shouldn't post my art account too much because it might make your sister feel like she's not the only creative one. Dad telling me, in his calm, rational voice, that it's just easier to go along with her sometimes. And me, always stepping aside, always apologizing for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. My throat tightened. I swallowed, but it didn't help. My eyes burned, and before I realized it, tears were slipping silently down my cheeks. Not loud sobs, just quiet grief, the kind that doesn't ask for comfort because it knows none is coming. I curled my knees to my chest and buried my face in the blanket, letting it all rise up. The unfairness, the years of being invisible, the constant shape-shifting to fit into a space that was never meant for me. All of it. Eventually, I sat up and wiped my face. I looked around my room, at the string lights, still unlit. The gift bag on the desk from myself to me, still unopened. The single balloon floating in the corner, drifting near the ceiling like it hadn't gotten the memo. I exhaled. Then I stood up and pulled my duffel bag from under the bed. I wasn't running away, I was opting out. I started small. A couple of t-shirts, my favorite hoodie, a pair of jeans, my journal, the photo I had of Grandma Winona tucked into a frame on my nightstand, toothbrush, headphones, a spare charger, essentials only, no drama, no note on the pillow, no slammed doors, just space, just enough to remind myself that I was still a person, not a supporting character in someone else's story. Down the hallway, I heard laughter again. Sable and her friends were still downstairs, still sipping from my solo cups, still basking under the lights I'd strung with my own hands. I zipped the bag, slowly. I sat down beside it, arms wrapped around my knees. If I was invisible in their world, maybe I needed to leave it all together. I hadn't left yet. I'd sat with my bag for what felt like hours, unmoving, numb. My body still, but my thoughts louder than any noise the house could make. The hallway, once familiar, now felt like a waiting room for something I couldn't name. I hadn't packed for a destination, only for distance. I had replayed every word from last night on a loop. The dismissal, the lies, the party that wasn't. My parents hadn't knocked once to check on me. Sable, of course, had no reason to. She was too busy posting more pictures in my dress, under my lights, laughing like she was grieving a war I had caused. Around 4 that afternoon, the house grew eerily still. The guests had long since left. The air hung thick with whatever unspoken mess they refused to clean up. I stayed by the front door, bag beside me, heart pounding but strangely steady. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay here. That much had finally settled inside me like a truth I no longer had to argue with. When the doorbell rang, I flinched. Nobody moved. I waited. Once, twice, 5 seconds, and still no sound from upstairs. No one even leaned over the railing to call out, "Can you get that?" the way they normally did when it was food delivery or a neighbor, just that loaded silence. So I got up and opened it, and there he was, Grandpa Ellison. He stood there in a pressed button-down and khakis, like he'd just come from one of his Sunday bridge games. In his left hand, a small brown paper bag, the kind he always brought when he brought oranges from his backyard tree. He looked me in the eye, not past me, not around me, directly at me. "Something told me I should stop by," he said. Calm, even, as if this were the most normal day in the world. I couldn't speak for a second. I hadn't seen him in weeks. Not since our last brunch where Sable monopolized the conversation, and I smiled politely like always. Not since he slid me a $20 under the table and whispered, "For that sketchbook you mentioned." "You're just in time," I finally said, stepping aside. He walked in and placed the bag on the entryway table. His eyes took in the scene quickly, the duffel bag, my bare feet, the way my face probably looked like I hadn't slept in a day. "Where's your father?" he asked. "Probably watching TV," I answered. "Same as last night." Ellison didn't nod or comment. He just started walking toward the living room. I followed him down the hallway, each footstep a little sharper than the last. When we turned the corner, sure enough, there they were. Dad on the recliner, Mom curled up on the couch, both half watching something on Netflix like we hadn't just had a familial meltdown. Dad muted the television when he saw us. "Dad," he said, a little too cheerfully. "What a surprise." "Is it?" Grandpa asked. Mom stood up, brushing non-existent crumbs off her lap. "We didn't expect you today." "I imagine you didn't." He didn't sit yet. He just stood there, letting the pause settle into something uncomfortable. Then, "Why was Kalia's birthday canceled?" Mom and Dad exchanged a glance that barely lasted a breath, but it was enough. Enough to tell me they hadn't rehearsed for this. "Well, it's not that simple," Mom started. "It's very simple," he cut in. "Your daughter turned 18. There was supposed to be a party. I was told it was happening. I set money aside for it. Yet here I am, arriving the day after, and your youngest granddaughter looks like she hasn't slept, while your eldest has posted 17 photos from what appears to be a private event featuring party lights, balloons, and cookies." Mom opened her mouth, closed it. Dad cleared his throat. "She had a meltdown," Dad said. "Sable?" "Her trip to LA got canceled and she was devastated." "So the party was canceled," Grandpa said flatly, "for her." "We didn't want to hurt either of them," Mom offered weakly. It felt unfair to celebrate when Sable was so emotionally fragile. Grandpa finally sat down in the armchair across from them, leaning forward slightly. "And did you tell Kalia?" he asked. Silence. "No," I said for them. "They let me bake, decorate, set everything up, and then, when no one showed up, I found them in here, watching a movie, like it was just another Friday." Grandpa looked back at them. "You didn't even tell her?" "We were trying to avoid upsetting her more," Dad muttered. Ellison exhaled, then leaned back. "Interesting." Mom tried again. "We love both our girls." "You fund both your girls?" he interrupted, voice still cool. They both froze. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded slip of paper. "Bank transfer receipts." "For the last 3 years," he said evenly, "I've been supporting this family. Quietly, monthly, no questions asked, because I believed you were trying, because I thought you were raising 2 strong, good women who loved and respected each other. Now I'm wondering if you've just been raising one and erasing the other." Mom's eyes welled up instantly. "That's not fair, isn't it?" Grandpa didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. "Let me ask you this," he continued. "If I hadn't shown up today, would you have told me about any of this? About the canceled party? About the photos I saw online this morning? About your daughter packing her things to leave this house?" Dad tried to speak, but Grandpa held up a hand. "No more spin, no more excuses. You took her milestone birthday and threw it out to protect the feelings of someone who's already been given everything. And I know because I paid for it." Silence again. Thick. Heavy. Finally, he turned to me. "I'm heading back to my place," he said. "You're welcome to come with me, Kalia. I can't undo what's been done, but I can offer you a clean room, a quiet space, and a door that locks." I didn't cry. I exhaled. My parents didn't move, didn't speak, just sat there, letting the weight of it sit like furniture they didn't know how to rearrange. Grandpa stood, looked back one last time. I can't force you to come with me, he said gently. But I am going home now. I grabbed my bag, not quickly, not in a flurry, just decisively, and I followed him out. I didn't look back as I walked through that door, but I heard them start to panic behind me. The car ride to Grandpa's house was quiet. Not the awkward, heavy kind, just quiet in the way peace sounds after chaos. I kept my eyes on the road, fingers gently resting on the strap of my duffel bag. Grandpa didn't ask questions. He didn't push. He just drove, humming something low under his breath like it was another ordinary Sunday, and not the day I'd walked out of the only home I'd ever known. We got to his house just before sunset. The air smelled like rosemary and dust. I remember noticing how everything inside felt still but not stagnant. Books lined the living room wall, real ones, with cracked spines and worn corners. The kind you don't just display to look smart. He had framed court documents, photos with clients, and one black and white picture of Grandma Winona in front of a courthouse, holding a gavel like it was her own weapon of choice. I showered, ate half a sandwich. Then I went to sleep without checking my phone. The next morning, I woke up in a bed that creaked slightly when I rolled over. It was a simple room, a wide window, a wooden dresser, no TV. Just stillness, the kind that doesn't demand anything from you. There was a faint scent of oranges coming from the kitchen. I followed it. Grandpa was already at the table, slicing fruit onto a plate beside a steaming mug of black coffee. He didn't look up right away, just gestured to the tea kettle and said, "You take it with honey or lemon?" "Both," I answered. He poured without another word, handed me a cup, then went back to peeling the last orange with surgical precision. That was how he gave me space, without asking, without performing sympathy, just by letting me be. I sat down across from him, letting the tea warm my hands. "This house," I said, glancing around, "it doesn't feel like it whispers behind your back." He looked up, eyebrows raised. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "It doesn't pretend to welcome you while wondering why you're here." He nodded, then popped a slice of orange into his mouth and chewed thoughtfully. "That's because it doesn't." A small, uninvited laugh escaped my throat. Just a breath. But it was the first in days. I didn't tell him everything, not yet. But I told him enough, about the canceled party, the social media posts, the lies told to my friends. And when I was done, he didn't interrupt or jump in with advice. He just refilled my cup and said, "So what's your next move?" That question stayed with me all afternoon. I sat in his study for most of the day, surrounded by quiet old case files and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Around 3 o'clock, I pulled out my phone and opened a blank message screen. To Mom and Dad. Message, "If Sable doesn't move out, don't contact me again." I didn't add emojis, no threats, no explanations, just that. I stared at the message for a minute, then hit send. Not because I thought it would change anything, but because I needed it documented. Not for them, for me. A receipt of self-respect. I set my phone face down on the desk. They wouldn't choose me, not over her, but I already knew that. I had always been the easier one to lose. That night, after dinner, Grandpa asked if I wanted to help him dig through some of Grandma's old things in the den. He said he was trying to finally clean out her desk, something he'd put off for years. We went through boxes of cards, newspaper clippings, recipe books. Then he opened the small top drawer, the one with the lock. He held the key like it was something sacred, turning it slowly before opening the drawer. From the very back, wrapped in a piece of faded lace, he pulled out a velvet box. "I meant to give this to you a while ago," he said, handing it to me. "But I kept thinking your mother would—" His voice trailed off. He didn't finish the sentence. I opened the box. Inside was a necklace, delicate silver, with a charm shaped like a crescent moon. I didn't recognize it, not from photos, not from memory, but it felt like something I should have had all along. "She bought that for you the day after you were born," Grandpa said. "Your mom didn't want it distracting Sable when she was little. Said she was going through a clingy phase and might throw a fit if she thought you were getting special attention." I blinked, staring at the charm. "She kept it hidden all this time?" He shrugged. "It wasn't mine to give back, until now." My chest tightened. Not with sadness, but with the realization that someone had seen me, even when I was a newborn, even when no one else wanted me seen. She saw me, I whispered, even if they erased me later. Grandpa didn't say anything. He didn't need to. I closed the box and held it to my chest for a moment. Later that night, in the mirror of the guest bathroom, I put the necklace on. It wasn't just jewelry, it was proof. Proof that I wasn't a mistake or an accessory or a second draft of someone more important. Proof that someone, once, looked at me and thought, she deserves something beautiful. My reflection caught in the mirror, not as a kid or a shadow, but as a young woman who had stopped waiting for approval. I'd sent my terms, and now I was waiting for their mistake. The email came on a Thursday morning, 5 days after I moved in with Grandpa. I had just finished sweeping the back patio, wiping the red dust from the edges of the wrought iron chairs he liked to sit on after dinner. I had my phone plugged in on the kitchen counter, music playing softly through the speaker. James Taylor, one of Grandpa's favorites. It was the first morning I'd felt truly steady since walking out of that house. Then it vibrated. Once, twice, a third time. I dried my hands on the dish towel and picked it up, expecting it to be Nico, maybe a text from Eva. Instead, it was a screenshot. The top of the image read, regarding Kalia. Underneath, in painfully familiar font, was an email thread. From mom@elstonhousehold.com to extended family list, friends list, school board contact. Subject, clarification regarding Kalia's current status. I didn't even open the message right away. I just stood there, thumb hovering over the image, my gut already telling me what it was. They didn't reply to my message. That was already the answer. But I hadn't expected this. I finally zoomed in. It was a carefully written essay of preemptive damage control. Not from concern, not from love, but from fear. Fear of what I might say, of what I might do next. They claimed I had been struggling with emotional dysregulation, that I had been acting out in ways that deeply concerned the family. They wrote that I had become volatile after years of trying to find my identity and that they were working closely with professionals to support me. They also included a line that made me go cold. We believe Grandpa Ellison means well, but his strong personality has made Kalia more reactive in recent weeks. Reactive. They were trying to paint me as unstable, dangerous even, and him as manipulative. No one from that list had seen me cry in years. No one had ever witnessed me lose my temper. But they had written it all down like it was fact, strategic, believable, and just vague enough to sound reasonable. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a hit piece. I sat down slowly at the kitchen table, letting the phone rest in my palm, my heart pacing hard but quiet. So this was it. Their move. Not a conversation, not a phone call. A digital character assassination sent to everyone who might eventually hear my side. They were scared. This wasn't about protecting me, this was about controlling the narrative. They said it first, so they could make whatever I said next look like retaliation. This is fear, I whispered to myself. They're scared of what I'll say, so they said it first. I didn't cry. I didn't text back. I just closed the screenshot, saved it to a new folder I labeled receipts, and sat in the stillness. Later that afternoon, when Grandpa got home from his usual chess game at the rec center, he found me in the study, phone in hand, staring blankly at the wall. "Something happen?" he asked, setting down his keys. I handed him the phone. He read it silently. His face didn't move, but I could see the muscle in his jaw twitch once. He didn't say anything for a while, just handed it back to me and walked to the kitchen. When he returned, he had a manila envelope in his hand. "Print it out," he said simply. "Put it in here. Never know what we might need down the line." That was the only reaction he gave. No outrage, no explosion, just strategy. I followed suit. That night I couldn't sleep, not because of the email, but because of what it reminded me of, things I'd been trying not to remember. The voice memos. I had dozens of old recordings on my phone, notes to self, snippets of Sable's rants I'd saved to use in art projects, and one that I hadn't listened to in years. I scrolled until I found it. The timestamp read, March 8th, 2017. It started in the background of the kitchen. I was 12. Mom's voice was low but clear. Don't let her wear red. It clashes with Sable's palette. A pause. The shuffle of dishes. Then again. She can't be too happy. It'll make Sable feel worse. Let her sit this one out. 12-year-old me had recorded that by accident while doodling in the corner with my phone in my hoodie pocket. Back then, I hadn't understood it. I thought it was about clothes, about colors. But listening now, as a young woman who had just been declared a threat to her own family's image, it meant something else entirely. My whole life had been curated to complement someone else's spotlight. I played the clip again, slower. She can't be too happy. That wasn't parenting. That was emotional conditioning. I set the phone down, walked to the mirror, and stared at myself. My skin looked tired. My eyes, flat. But under that, I saw something else. Not weakness, awareness. I was a shadow they dressed like wallpaper, I murmured. Pretty, quiet, just enough to match the room. But I wasn't going to stay stuck on their walls anymore. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I didn't wait for breakfast. I didn't check my phone. I went straight to Grandpa's study and opened my laptop. I created a new document. Blank. Clean. The cursor blinked. And for the first time, I didn't blink back. I started typing. One sentence, then another. Not for revenge, not for attention, but because they thought they could write my story for me. They forgot I know how to write too. The words didn't come all at once. They arrived slowly, like rain on a windshield, uncertain, uneven, but relentless. At first, I just stared at the blinking cursor. It was easier to focus on that little line than to confront the truth in my head. I'd spent most of my life holding it all in. Now, I had to let it pour out. It was a week after I left. A full 7 days of silence from my parents, radio static from Sable. 7 days of no apologies, no clarifications, just the email smear campaign they launched behind my back. And then, the memo Grandpa found in his inbox. He'd walked into the kitchen holding his phone like it smelled bad. "Looks like your mom copied me by accident," he said, placing it on the table in front of me. At first glance, it looked like a rough draft. Some lines were highlighted in yellow, others had little comments in the margins, clearly meant to be reviewed before publishing. The subject line? Contingency statement, if Kalia speaks publicly. And it only got worse from there. Phrases like, emphasize concern for her emotional instability. Reframe as a family misunderstanding, position Sable as supportive. Mention long-standing financial stress to explain temporary withdrawal of birthday support. I couldn't even finish reading before I pushed the phone away. They don't want reconciliation, I said, more to myself than to Grandpa. They want damage control. He nodded. They're not worried about your voice. They're worried about losing their image. It was quiet for a moment. Then I looked at him, steady. Then let's give them something they can't control. That night, I stayed up in his study. He offered to help, but I needed to do this alone. I opened a clean document and typed the title, The Child Who Was Never Picked. I didn't use names. I didn't need to. Anyone who knew us would know who I meant. And those who didn't? They'd recognize the pattern anyway, because I wasn't alone. I knew that now. I wrote for hours about the party that never happened, the dress my sister stole, the lights I strung for guests who never came, the silence, the years of being told to make room, to tone it down, to wait my turn, a turn that never arrived. I included the messages from friends who were told I canceled. I mentioned the voice memo I'd kept for years, my mother saying not to let me wear red because it would throw off Sable's aesthetic. I didn't rant. I didn't accuse. I simply told the truth. You don't know what it's like to grow up in a house where your happiness is a threat, I wrote. Where your milestones are minimized and your silence is applauded, so long as it keeps things peaceful for everyone else. I paused after that line, let the truth of it settle into the page. I wasn't the angry one, I continued. I was the ignored one who finally spoke. By sunrise, the letter was done. I uploaded it to my old art blog, the one I hadn't updated since junior year. I shared the link to the alumni page from my private school, the same one my mother still used to coordinate events and show off photos of Sable's influencer campaigns. Then I closed the laptop and went outside. The desert air was cold that morning. Still, like the moment before a storm, when the sky holds its breath. I stood barefoot on the porch and waited. I didn't have to wait long. By mid-morning, my phone started buzzing. A comment here, a message there, then more. Dozens, then hundreds. People from school, from church, former teachers, distant cousins, strangers. Some left messages like, "I thought I was the only one. Thank you for saying what I never could." This was me. Every word. Others were angrier. At my family. At the culture that lets it happen. "She's brave. They should be ashamed. You don't raise a daughter just to erase her." By lunchtime, the post had been shared over 3,000 times. Someone even turned part of it into a graphic quote and posted it on Instagram. I wasn't the angry one. I was the ignored one who finally spoke. It had 20,000 likes within an hour. And then came the emails. Not to me, to them. I found out from Eva. She sent me a screenshot. Subject line, "This is what you raised?" Apparently, one of our aunts, one who used to host 4th of July cookouts, had forwarded the letter back to my mother with a curt note. Explains a lot. Another one read, "You owe her more than silence. You owe her truth." I didn't feel vindicated. Not yet. Just seen. I hadn't named them. But people recognized the type. The emails from my parents came later that night. First, my father. "Kalia, call me. We need to talk about this post. This is not fair to your mother." Then my mother. "Sweetheart, we understand you're hurting, but this wasn't the way to handle it. You've embarrassed the family." And finally, Sable. "Wow. So you're the victim now?" I didn't reply. I didn't owe them that. What they wanted was a reaction. What they feared was my silence. Not the kind I used to give, the kind that gave them space to lie, but the kind that comes after the truth has already been told. I stepped outside again, phone still buzzing in my hand. The porch light was still on from the night before. I hadn't noticed it earlier. It flickered slightly in the breeze. Grandpa had gone to bed hours ago, after reading the letter in full, saying only, "You wrote like someone who knows how to survive." I sat on the porch steps, scrolling through the comments one last time. And then the screen lit up again. Dad, Mom, Sable. Call after call after call. I let them ring. They taught me to stay quiet. But I learned that silence doesn't protect you. It just gives them time to sharpen the knife. A month passed. It wasn't slow, like you'd expect grief to be, and it wasn't fast either. It moved with a strange rhythm. Quiet mornings with Grandpa, evenings filled with chess matches, and occasional moments where I caught myself forgetting I had ever lived in another house. But then came graduation. I wasn't nervous. Not in the usual way. There was nothing left for me to prove to them. This day wasn't about their pride or their presence. It was mine. And finally, that meant something. Backstage at Chaparral High, I stood in my cap and gown, holding my diploma folder with hands that had steadied over the last few weeks. My name was already called. I had crossed the stage to polite applause and one loud whistle from Grandpa Ellison, who sat in the front row, perfectly straight, with his signature navy tie and a quiet fire in his eyes. There were 2 empty seats beside him, reserved signs still taped to the backs. They had RSVP'd. Of course they had. Publicly, they had to save face. But when the lights dimmed and the graduates processed in, those chairs stayed vacant, unclaimed, and somehow, that felt right. Better even. I didn't realize how deeply I needed their absence until I saw the empty chairs holding more honesty than their presence ever did. After the ceremony, I found Grandpa waiting in the shaded courtyard behind the auditorium, standing alone beneath a palm tree. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't checking his watch, just waiting, like he knew I'd need a minute to take it all in. "You looked calm up there," he said as I approached. I felt calm. Not everyone gets that on a day like today. I didn't have to look for anyone in the crowd, I told him. That helped. He handed me a small white envelope. His eyes never left mine. I thought you should see this now. I opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet, one of those official notarized documents with gold seals and thick paper. At the top, Last Will and Testament, Amendment. I scanned quickly until I saw it. Sable Kerrigan Elston, removed from all financial inheritance effective immediately. Cause cited. Failure to uphold ethical representation of family interest. I swallowed hard. She didn't see that coming, I murmured. She thought being the favorite meant she couldn't fall, Grandpa said quietly. Turns out, she just never looked down. I folded the paper and slid it back into the envelope, my chest strangely still. It didn't feel like revenge. It felt like gravity. We walked in silence toward the parking lot, passing clusters of families taking photos in matching outfits. Laughter, camera flashes, squeals of pride. It all formed a soft backdrop, not quite reaching us. And then, I saw her. Sable. She stood near the side exit, overdressed in a tight blush pink dress and heels too high for a school gymnasium. She clutched her phone in one hand and a Starbucks cup in the other, scanning the crowd like she had been waiting there all along. When she spotted me, her posture changed, more poised, less casual. Kalia, she called out, her voice sugary and loud enough to attract attention. Let's take one picture, just one. I kept walking, but she followed, heels clicking sharply on the concrete. Come on, she said again, smile tight but practiced. Just for Mom, just for appearances. I stopped, turned, met her eyes fully for the first time in weeks. No, she blinked, thrown off by how flat my voice was. No? You've never wanted me in the frame, I said. Let's not fake it now. Her smile faltered. We're still family, she said quickly, voice faltering just slightly. What's one picture? I didn't answer. Instead, I stepped to the side as a photographer passed, snapping pictures of another graduate. I motioned subtly for him to go ahead, and he did, capturing Sable, alone, standing too stiffly, smiling too hard. She looked back at me, stunned, and I turned away. As we walked toward the car, I could feel the weight shift around us. People had seen. Teachers, classmates, extended family who had made the drive. Even the school principal looked our way as we passed. There was no shouting, no slamming doors, just a moment suspended between truth and consequence. Grandpa opened the passenger door for me. I slipped in without a word. As he started the engine, he glanced over. Any regrets? I looked out the window, watching as Sable stood frozen, phone still in hand, smile fading like a mask losing shape. Only that I didn't speak sooner, I said. Then I paused. But then again, I wasn't ready. And I think maybe it wasn't just me who needed to heal. The drive to Flagstaff took just under 2 hours, most of it in silence. Grandpa insisted on taking me up himself, even though I'd offered to Uber. You don't send a kid off to build a new life by tapping an app, he said, handing me a thermos of coffee at dawn like it was some kind of rite of passage. We didn't talk much, but the silence wasn't empty. It was familiar. Safe. The trees grew taller as we climbed north, the desert slowly giving way to pines and cooler air. I sat with my window cracked slightly, letting the scent of the forest fill the car, and I watched as the heat haze of home disappeared in the rearview mirror. When we pulled into the campus, I didn't expect to feel anything in particular, but I did. Not excitement, not nerves, just a deep, undeniable sense that I was exactly where I needed to be. Inside the admissions building, I signed the final paperwork. A simple form to finalize my student status, tucked in among financial aid confirmations and ID photos. At the bottom was a section labeled Legal Name Verification. I took a deep breath and carefully printed, Kalia Winona Rourke. The woman at the desk glanced up with a gentle smile. That's a beautiful name. I nodded. It's my grandmother's. And just like that, it was official. I didn't keep the name that left me off every birthday card. I didn't carry the name that only existed to frame someone else in perfect lighting. I chose mine, every letter of it. Later, as I unpacked in my small dorm room, I found a place for just one framed photo. Me and Grandpa standing outside the courthouse on the day the name change became real. I was wearing a flannel and ripped jeans. He wore a collared shirt and the proudest look I'd ever seen on his face. I texted Nico. Settled. Feels weird, but good weird. He replied with a thumbs up and a meme about overpriced textbooks. It made me smile. I didn't need a tribe. I didn't need a scene. I just needed room, my name, my story. That night, Grandpa and I had dinner at a quiet diner near campus. He ordered meatloaf. I got the same, just to make it easy. We sat in the corner booth, sipping root beer and watching a couple in their 70s argue lovingly over how many napkins to stuff in their pockets before leaving. He cleared his throat midway through the meal. "There's one more thing I need to tell you," he said, not meeting my eyes. I waited. "When your mother found out she was pregnant with you," he began, "she was not in a good place. Your grandmother and I had just come back from burying her parents. It was a rough year." He paused, then looked up. "She wanted to give you up. Said it was a sign of bad timing. Too much grief. Too much chaos. But your grandmother put her foot down. She told her, 'This one stays.' And so you did." I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. "That makes a lot of sense now," I said softly. He nodded, not apologetic, not defensive, just truthful. We didn't talk about it further. We didn't need to, because I finally understood the distance, the undercurrent, the way my mother always seemed a little off when she looked at me, like she was trying to feel something that wouldn't come. 2 days later, after Grandpa had driven back to Scottsdale, I received a letter in my dorm mailbox. No return address. I recognized the handwriting. I held the envelope for a long time before sliding it into the bottom drawer of my desk. I didn't open it. Some things don't need to be reopened just because they arrive sealed. My classes started the following week. Psychology, ethics, creative writing, the usual freshman slate, but I walked those halls with more than books in my backpack. I carried a name I had chosen, a story I had written, a silence I had broken. And one afternoon, as I crossed the quad alone, I looked up at the sky and whispered a quiet truth I never thought I'd say out loud. I wasn't saved. I just left. There was no dramatic rescue, no apology that made it all better, just the quiet act of stepping away from what was killing me and choosing something, anything, else. And sometimes, that's enough. They erased my birthday, but they didn't erase me. Sometimes, the people who are supposed to love us the most are the very ones who erase us little by little, until we have no choice but to rewrite our own story. This wasn't just a story about a ruined birthday. It was about reclaiming your place, your voice, and your worth, even when your own family refuses to see it. What about you? Have you ever been the invisible one in your own home? If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more real-life family stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters.